we need an attitude reset as a country where, we don't value this. Like, I tell people I'm a teacher, and they either act like I'm in the military and say thank you for your service, or or
Thank you for
they
your
kind of
service.
look at me like, oh, okay, you don't really have a real job. All the rest of us over here, we've got a real job. So we just have this attitude that education is just child's play. And so we can kind of do whatever we want with it. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. This is the most important piece of
Yeah.
who you are.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Out of Office. We're doing something a little different here. We usually talk to a founder, but you may not know that I run a venture fund called Families Fund, and we invest in the American family across education and health. So we thought we'd do something different and focus on the education piece and talk to an actual teacher in California. Karen, how are you?
Well, I'm a teacher on summer vacation, so I could not be better. How are you?
We are doing pretty good. I would love for you to kind of walk us through how you became a teacher. Like, what is education to you, and how are you enjoying it?
Yeah, so just a little context. I am the youngest of 5 siblings, and there's a little bit of a gap between my closest sibling and I. All of my four older siblings went to public school, and this is no hate on the public schools because we need them, but they all had really bad experiences. And when it came to me, my grandparents, my mom's parents, said, we think we're going to send Karen to this new private school in the city that we live in. That was not something that my family could have afforded. And so my grandparents paid for me to go to school. And it just changed my life. And I think it made me into the person that I am today. I remember sitting in class as a kid, and I would think to myself, oh my gosh, my teachers are so smart. I want to be just like them. Like, I would do it just like them.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it clicked one day. You can do that. You can go be a teacher.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me what. So I went to public school in California. I have my gripes, but it wasn't horrible. I guess what was the biggest delta between your 4 older siblings and yourself?
I think it was the communities that we shared. I mean, there's a lot, but I think really the community is one of the biggest pieces because private schools can discriminate. And if you are a problem for the school or your family is a problem, you cause problems for other kids, they retain the right to say, we're not going to welcome you back in the fall and you have to leave. And so as a result of that, I really felt like all of my friends bolstered my life. And I'm still friends with almost all of them to this day because it was small, it was tight knit, and it was really high quality.
So you're telling me high school didn't have to be horrible? Like, I could have had friends that were actually nice to me and not gotten picked on.
It's still not the best time, but I think it made it a little better.
Okay, very nice. Got it. Very cool. Okay.
I mean, the piece about loving your teachers is pretty interesting. I mean, my experience is totally different. So I grew up in a small town in Ohio, population's about 450. The local school didn't teach algebra until senior year, so I went to a private school in West Virginia instead, so I could learn some math. It wasn't great, but like everything is relative. Yeah. I mean, honestly, my math teacher, Mr. Hahn, is the only person I remember. I don't think I can name another teacher, nor would I ever want to see one of them again. Not like in a mean way, like at this point, just like in a neutral way. Like, they left a zero impression on me, and I think most of my peers feel the same way. And so it's pretty incredible to hear like you loved all your teachers. Like, I don't know. I don't even know if I believe you. Like,
I think there was one difficult year. I think my 4th grade year was really difficult. But other than that, no, I loved them all. And I still see some of them. And it is such a treat, like running into an old friend, and they always remember your name. They remember what you were like as a kid. You share stories. They're like exuberant to see you. And so it was great. It was like the community that I think every kid deserves.
Yeah, for sure. Jack, what do you think? Were there teachers that left an impression on you in public school?
I had like 2. There was a physics teacher and a math teacher. Otherwise, yeah, it was mostly negative. Like, I think I had one teacher, and granted, this is probably more a reflection of me than her, but my Spanish teacher was friends with this teacher that I was going to have the next year. And on the first day of class in this new teacher's class, there's like a seating chart, and my name had weirdo written next to it. And I thought, I thought, okay, that sucks. And that was like not atypical. Like I got sent outside sometimes. I'm like a good person, but I got sent outside sometimes because I was rambunctious. Teachers didn't like me, like they were openly disrespectful, and it wasn't just me, but I remember that like pretty vividly. The teachers like clearly had favorites. If you weren't on that list, you were either a nobody or like even worse. So
that's so sad. That breaks my heart. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't still think about that all the time. So yeah,
keeps you up at night. Yeah,
it does. It does.
Chips on your shoulder are always useful as an adult.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's your motivation. They're actually helping you.
It's true. It's true. More
Like, Karen,
than you guys
it's interesting
realize.
Karen, it's interesting that you bring up a community, because an interesting Twitter account I follow, Tracing Wood Grains, just shares a bunch of education stuff, and shared some studies that came out recently showing that any group of students who are similar academically perform better. So basically, if you have a cohort, it doesn't matter the level. Like we always hear about gifted, like that gifted schools do well because all the kids are gifted and they can teach them at this high level. But like, go figure, that's true of every level. And so they found that if there were a bunch of this coming out of COVID, there's a bunch of at-risk kids. If you grouped all the at-risk kids in math or reading or whatever the subject was, they seemed to do excellent by the end of the year because they were all together. And so it's interesting that you say that about community, because I think it does bear out in the data as well.
Yeah, totally. And especially if you're with people who are like you. Like imagine being in a situation where you're the student who struggles and you're in a group of students who excel. You're not even going to want to try. The whole time you're just going to be thinking, I can't do this, or they're going to make fun of me, or whatever it is. And so that makes a lot of sense.
And so another thing I wanted to bring up was, I guess, Karen, you went to private school, so did I. Jack, you went to public school. When I think about my son's education, I always keep that in mind. Like, hey, like a mediocre private school or public school is fine because that's what we did. And I don't know, you can speak for yourselves, but I don't know, my life is pretty good. So, even if school wasn't the best, like it's not like it's something that ended my life and stopped me from getting what I have now. So I always had as a backstop, like, okay, it'll be fine. Like if I don't find some great alternative education, it'll be fine. But then someone just stopped me and was like, Kartik, you're in your 30s. Like a lot has changed since you went to school. And so, Karen, is that something you can speak to? Do you think a lot has changed over time if you think about that, like 10, 20, like decades?
I think so. I think, now kids have tech. So that's one major change. I mean, I had tech. I had the iPod that you could change the song by scrubbing that little circle. That wasn't stealing my attention the way these kids have iPads in front of them. So tech is big. I think parenting styles have changed. But I also think COVID was a really big divider. And a lot of kids fell off academically during COVID, and they haven't been able to pick themselves back up. Something that I saw, this isn't something that I do now, but I used to do, because I teach at a private school, I used to do the entrance testing exam for the students. And what I noticed is that whatever point in school you were at, when COVID happened, you just stopped learning math right there. And so I would have students who were trying to come into 7th grade, and COVID happened when they were in the middle of 4th grade, and their grade equivalent, as it's called, would come back as 4.5, which means 4th grade, 5th month, right in the middle of 4th grade. It just stopped there, and they couldn't pick it back up. And so, yeah, I would say tech, parenting, and COVID have been really big changes for education.
And how do you feel about, you mentioned iPads, but like phones in school. For the audience, can you kind of talk about the grades and like the ages you've taught so we can kind of center it around that?
Yeah, certainly. I have spent the last 4.5 years teaching 3rd grade. And so just for people who've forgotten, in elementary school, when you're in 3rd grade, you're 8, you turn 9. And then this coming fall, I'm going to be teaching 5th grade. So they come in when they're 10, they turn 11.
Okay. And I guess 8-year-olds don't have phones, right? Or just
you would be
sanity
surprised.
Check. Okay, yeah,
you would be
Tell
surprised. No, so some of them do. It wasn't a problem for me in class. It's not like, I think because my school was really strict, as a lot of private schools are, the phones in class was not an issue for me the way that would be for high schoolers or for middle schoolers. But the problem that I saw with my kids is that you can tell which students are at home just staring at a screen, because it's like their dopamine receptors are just completely fried in their brain. And learning, what I always say and what I truly believe is that learning is magical, and it is truly the closest we can get to magic. It should be very fun for kids, and it's an exciting discovery. And I've had kids before where I'm like, I could do a backflip in front of you right now, and you'd be like, I didn't like that. I'm bored. And so you can tell who doesn't have an attention span and who can't appreciate things that are exciting anymore because they're too overstimulated at home.
Have you been doing this long enough where you've seen the switch? Like, I know kids are getting phones earlier. TikTok is becoming more popular by the year. Was there a time in your career where kids were a little more tuned in? Like, is COVID the real divider, or is it smartphones?
Oh, that is a good question. I think, I started student teaching during the COVID pandemic. And that's also part of why I teach at a private school, because you have to get a student teaching assignment, and all of the public schools weren't accepting student teachers at the time. Oh. So I got one at a private school, and those kids were fine. What I will say though is COVID it impacted you differently depending on how old you were. And so if you are, like I had a class 2 years ago that they missed almost all of first grade because of COVID. And I could never, ever, ever get those kids to read. I retaught them over and over and over and over again, and they could not figure out how to read. They were fine in every other way. And then the class after them missed kindergarten and first grade. And so when you're learning how to be in school, and they could read, they were okay on reading, but they couldn't, they didn't know how to behave in a classroom. Yeah. And from what I've heard, they've just continued like that. And so it's almost like they're getting frozen at these different developmental points and not being able to move forward.
And I'm not sure if you can speak to this, but do you think there's a difference between the kids that experienced kind of COVID coming out of it and dealing with devices across like private school, public school, maybe even homeschoolers? Like, I don't know what all kinds of kids you've met and if you can compare it all.
Yeah, I don't know if that one is so dependent on the type of school that you go to as much as it is your parents. And so
I see. Yeah.
I think we have a generation of parents right now who have been sold this idea that iPad is going to quiet your kid down. And that's not to say, parenting is extremely difficult. Parenting is extremely difficult. Kids, I'll say this, kids are annoying sometimes. Sometimes you just need peace and quiet. You're overstimulated yourself, and you're just a person. And so you're like, I'm going to give them this iPad because I'm about to lose my mind. And that's completely real. But we have been sold an idea that this is safer than it really is. And so it just depends if your parents let you stare at a screen all the time. And that's going to be on a case-by-case basis.
I see. Do you think that it's interesting? I mean, I see this in the wild all the time, and it makes me sad, I guess, when I see it, but I try not to be too judgmental. I mean, my son is only a year and a half, but he's crazy. Like, he's running around, he's doing stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's watched a little TV, like he likes Thomas the Tank Engine. I kind of on purpose never showed him anything on my phone. Like, he's not aware that my phone can play videos. Like, he only thinks the TV can do it. So it's like at least a return to our childhood, if not, because I think like going full caveman is stupid. Like, computers had a fundamental part of my childhood. Like, without them, I would not be here. So that's what I've kind of tried to do, but I see it in public all the time, and I get it. Like, I don't do it, but I do get it. Like, I'll see parents and they have a phone and they're just playing a video so they can enjoy lunch or something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know. It's still, while I can empathize, it still makes me sad. Like, it's just a literal pacifier that works on children and adults alike.
Yeah. What's unfortunate, though, is if you introduce that too young, we're thinking that you're causing permanent structural change to their brains. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Jonathan Haidt, but I'm like a cult follower. Yep. And he talks about how, not all screens are equal. It's okay to watch like a 90-minute movie that exists in a moral universe. Like, I played so many video games as a kid. Like, I was in front of the screen playing Zelda like all Saturday. And I don't think that's not damaging because it's slower paced. There's goals to meet. There's strategy involved. So like video games, TV, long form, screen time, like movies, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What's bad is when we have these quick videos that are unrelated to one another that are overstimulated.
And I'm curious, the divide between boys and girls. So I know for me, like, I was a gifted kid, but school was always impossible because I couldn't sit still. Like, it was impossible for the full 12 years. Is that mostly because I'm a boy and like boys are just not wired to sit still? That's what I've heard a lot of, and especially like some of the works you just mentioned. So I'm curious what your experience. Is school harder for boys than girls, or am I just like, drinking the Kool-Aid because it makes me feel good?
No, there is a little bit of a difference. I will say I love all my students equally, but usually the boy students are harder to deal with in class. And you know that you're going to have a really calm year if you have a girl heavy class, which
Interesting.
it's just true. It's true because I don't know exactly why that is, how much of it is brain differences and how much of it is like cultural expectations between boys and girls. I want to chalk it mostly up to brain differences. Boys' brains do mature a little bit slower than girls. And there's research that supports that boys do better when you hold them back a year from kindergarten. I think that's completely true. And there's also research to show that when you separate boys and girls in school, girls actually do better in math because they're not, I have seen girls in my class, I'll ask them a math question and then they look at whoever their boy crush is before they look back at me and answer it. Yes, as young as 8. I'm like, oh my gosh, girl, it doesn't matter what he thinks. He's thinking about worms. But no, school's a little bit harder for boys because they do just have more energy. I don't exactly know the answer to that, how to make it more equitable between the sexes, but it is true.
I have heard of the red shirting thing, and I'll even say there are a guy. I was actually thinking about this yesterday. There's a guy who I graduated with who was just crushing it, but he's actually almost a year older than me, just based on his birthday. And I think about that sometimes. Like he was just always better than me in classes, and I remember that because we had a lot of classes together, and he just like kicked my butt. And I do think like, if my parents had held me back a year, like maybe things would have been different because they definitely came together for me. It just came together later.
Totally. I mean, me personally, if I have a son, he will be starting late.
Yeah. Very cool.
So Karen, how do you think about alternatives to going to a traditional public or private school? It's like some people are homeschooling their kids. There's a big push on micro schools now, like going to someone's house and like learning with 5 other kids. Mm-hmm. Up in Marin, we have forest school where you're outside in the trees all the time. Like, what do you think about these like kind of alternatives to regular school?
Yeah, I'm not opposed. I think that there is a school model for everybody, and I want there to be lots of different school models. As long as we're all hitting that same baseline education level that creates an educated public, I think it's fine. Like I think about one of my older brothers, he would have done really well in a Montessori school where he could just follow his interests more and maybe, like learn math through woodworking or working on cars or whatever. I went to the school that I went to was a classical school. So it was really structured, big emphasis on like great books like the Aeneid, the Iliad, etc. Emphasis on character education, highly organized. That was like perfect for me. I think I would have really failed in any other scenario. And so it's just, there's something for everybody. And I want everyone to be able to go to the kind of school that they need to go to.
How do you distinguish that? Is there a way you could take a group of 5th graders and figure that out by then? And then, middle high school is just so much better? Or is that something it's hard to predict up front?
I don't think it's too hard to predict for a teacher who's really in tune with their students. You're going to get a teacher. I mean, the smaller the class size, the more in tune the teacher is going to be with every student and like their personality, their interests, their strengths and their weaknesses. I think that certainly by 5th grade, we would be able to kind of decide which path you should take. And I think that it's probably just statistical that the majority of people are going to do well in a quote unquote normal school. And then you're going to have your outliers on either side. Someone needs something really rigorous and someone needs something more like discovery based and exploratory because of who they are.
So to dig into reading in these standardized tests, Karen, I know you have a lot of opinions on how to teach kids how to read, but I want to show the audience and Jack some data around reading first. So let me show you some charts. Okay, so here's some data from the NAEP around 4th grade reading scores. We're doing exactly as good as we were doing in 1992, and the trend downward started well before COVID. So this is kind of a scary thing where parents look at public school, and so this is all public school data that doesn't count anything else, and are worried and like just want new answers. That's why I brought up homeschooling and all these other alternatives, even if they may not be ideal in some scenarios or hard for different families to do. When you see this, you're just like, I'm not going to send my kid to public school. And about 20 years ago, I think it was 1 in 40, 1 in 60 kids were homeschooled, and now the number is 1 in 15. And so if we don't improve these scores, will anyone attend public school? Since we're all in California right now, this compares those same scores across states. And so when I shared this with other families in California, this was like jarring information. So this is comparing, if you look all the way to the left, Louisiana to California. So a bunch cheaper. The dollar number is per student. So it's $12,000 in Louisiana and $17,000 spent per student in California. I think it makes sense. California is a lot more expensive. I don't think that's that crazy. But the reading scores are higher. And so when people picture Louisiana, maybe you should stop picturing what you're picturing, because the kids are more literate than the kids in California.
It's like Wakanda over there. It's amazing.
So, I mean, it's pretty jarring. I mean, obviously these are all red states. It's not even a political thing. So the next chart, like, these are all blue states. I mean, California's getting crushed left and right. Like, it really doesn't matter. I mean, these states are spending more, so this is hard to read, but Massachusetts is spending $24,000. They're doing really well too. And they're doing about similar to Louisiana. And so when I dig into this more, there are two factors. So, Karen, I'd love to hear your opinion on California and California experimenting with just random new modalities they've made up to teach reading versus not. And to fill in, what's interesting is, what did Louisiana do? So they went back to the science of reading, very basic phonics-based reading education. And to see the scores go up, they didn't do anything special. Like, that's the clear takeaway. It's just no innovation. Just, oh yeah, phonics, this works. They did that for all the kids. And the thing they did on top of that was 3 times a year, they would screen all the kids. And if they were behind, they would get tutoring until they were no longer behind. And now they're one of the top states in reading. And so it can be done with less money. And so obviously that's going to get people frustrated. It's like, okay, why the hell can't we do that? We have, I don't know, 10, 100 times as much money per person in California. So yeah, Karen, I'd love to hear like your firsthand experience with reading and like what the hell is going on.
Yeah, I have so much to say. So just buckle in for this one.
Yeah, here we go.
First of all, when you look at that chart, you're really thinking like, is the California privilege real, or are we all stupid actually? No one can read. Yeah. So, okay, so you brought up the science of reading. Unfortunately, one of the things that has held us back from implementing that heavily in California is that it's become politicized. I don't know how, I don't know why, but when you talk about phonics-based instruction, what people imagine is a teacher at the front of a classroom talking directly to the students. That's called direct instruction or explicit instruction, when you're telling someone exactly how to do something. And you imagine all the kids in rows, and you're thinking all those kids are just bored out of their mind, and they're in this pseudo prison that we're calling school. And it turns out that people who are politically on the right think that's really good, we should do that. And people who are politically on the left feel negative feelings about that kind of classroom model. That's unfortunate, because reading is not a political issue. It's a human right. And it is true that the science, methodologies based on the science of reading produce readers, not people who are faking reading. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we kind of went astray in reading. And I want to talk a little bit about teacher education as well, because
Sure.
I think that that's one of the pieces of this puzzle that needs to be kind of dissected a little bit. A few decades ago, I'm not great at dates, but a few decades ago, there was this new style of reading that came in called balanced literacy, which has a great name to it. And right, when you hear that and you're like, yeah, balance it. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Was it unbalanced? Okay. So balanced literacy, and that's based on this idea called cueing, which was made really popular by this New Zealand researcher named Mari Clay. And then we had a bunch of publishers in the United States who picked it up. And a teacher who teaches 3 cueing, or who is told she has to teach 3 cueing by her administration or she's going to lose her job, would do something like hold a book up for the class, and maybe they're reading it together. And she goes, it's a picture book of 2 students and they're picking oranges. And it says Jack and Jill are picking. And then the word oranges is covered up with a sticky note. And she's like, what are they picking? And the kids go, fruit? No, try again. What are they picking? Oranges? You're such a reader. Oranges. They're picking oranges. And so one of the ways that teachers were told you have to teach is by having students use context clues, which sounds really good, but what they really mean by that is by looking at the picture and guessing, or by looking at the shape of a word and memorizing the shape of it and saying, yeah, that word says oranges, instead of sounding it out. So teachers were told to literally worship this type of teaching, this methodology, and it was not based in real science. So we end up with a bunch of illiterate kids. They're making progress in school, but not really. They don't know how to sound out any words. They don't know anything about syllables, etc. In comes phonics. Phonics is based on the science of reading. Just to be clear, the science of reading is not a curriculum. It's just a body of research. And then curriculum is written based off of research theories. So there's many different ways to teach the science of reading. It's not just one. Phonics just says, yeah, we're going to teach kids explicitly what every letter says and what groups of letters say and how to break apart words. We're going to teach them explicitly what grammar is. We're going to teach them explicitly what the parts of speech are. And they're going to be fluent readers. And that works. People think, as adults, we think, this is so boring. But have you forgotten that for kids, the first time that they read, it's like magic to them? And it's not boring. It's like a whole new world that's opened up to them. So yeah, what questions do you have? I could say more. I brought goodies.
Sure.
I brought science of reading goodies.
Wow.
Okay. Interesting. What do you have with you now? I mean, now that you bring them up.
Okay. Oh, I forgot to talk about teacher education as well. Sorry, let me walk back to that. So when I was in college, I had to take a bunch of, you take a bunch of literature classes, reading classes, literature for kids, etc.
Sure.
And when I took a lot of those, I was taught both balanced literacy and phonics. And so, and no one, to my memory, nobody said balanced literacy is not the way, by the way. And that was a mistake that we made. Nobody said that. They were both brought to the table as options for how to teach reading. And so when I became a teacher, despite loving reading myself, I hated teaching it because I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing, and it became my least favorite thing. And what I liked teaching, which I hate as a student, is math, because it was sequential and foundational and built on itself. But it turns out that reading is the exact same way. And so this year I got myself trained in the science of reading through, just shameless plug, through this institute called the Institute of Multisensory Education. They offer classes for $1,500. So you don't have to be a teacher to take it. You can go onto their website and you can go take it yourself. If you have kids, like, I would take it even if I wasn't a teacher, just because I want to know how to teach my own kids to read. And they have parent resources on their website too, so you don't have to go through the whole thing. And it is a structured literacy program based in the science of reading that is multisensory. And what we know about kids is that between 11 and 16 is when their ability to abstractly think comes in. And so reading is a bit abstract. And when you can make that tactile for kids, they learn much better. And so I brought a couple of things, not all of it, because it's a lot that they give you.
Sure.
But this is a good example of what kids in kindergarten, first and second grade would see learning foundational reading skills. Those are the years where you're supposed to learn how to read. These are all of the sounds in the English language. And they're on flashcards, and you show them to the kids, and they go, let me find a good one. You hold it up, and they go, and you go, yep, and you're reviewing it with them. When you're teaching them a new one, you say, C says, and they're writing it with their finger in sand. They're going, C says, spell, and they're all going, like, spelling it in the sand like that. You can do that with groups of letters, etc. And there's also, this is for the little kids because they've really got to touch stuff. We have a lot of strange spellings in English, and this institute calls them red words, meaning that they don't follow the rules you think they would follow. When you're learning a red word, something that you have is this flexible plastic screen. You have the kids put their paper on top of this and then write the word with a crayon. Then the crayon is textured on their paper. And so they're feeling the texture while they're writing it. They're feeling the texture of the crayon that they've written with their finger. And then you have them spell it on their arm in a way that crosses the midline of their body. So both hemispheres of their brain are talking to one another at the same time. Let's say our red word is like said. That's a really hard one because it makes the E sound, but it's AI. Yeah. So they go SAID, said. And they do that with their teacher a number of times. And what it does is it gets really deep in their brain. When you get to be one of the older kids, you're not learning necessarily how to read anymore. What you're learning is how to change and manipulate words, and that's something called morphology. And so that's adding prefixes and suffixes to words to change their meaning. So there's all the English morphemes, Greek and Latin bases in this card pack that teaches them how to change and manipulate words, and then also the bases of the English language, because English is based on Anglo-Saxon language, Latin, and Greek. So we kind of need to know 3 languages to be proficient English speakers, readers, and writers. And so same thing, you go through them with these and you have a multi-sensory experience where they're writing it, they're touching it, they're saying it. And what happens is they become very proficient readers.
I see. And to be clear, you mean kids not in California public school are learning this way?
This takes hold in California, especially because we have so many kids who need really targeted literacy instruction with we have a really high immigration population. So kids are coming to California all the time who don't speak English, you know?
Sure.
And you've really, really got to hone in on those kids or they're going to be left behind.
And how early are you teaching kids how to read? Or do we teach kids how to read?
That's a great question too. They should be, let me try again. Learning how to read is actually something that begins when children are still in the womb, because they can hear you talking. Unless you are training your ear to learn a language, you're not going to be able to proficiently read it. This is why when you hear someone speaking a language that you don't know, it all just sounds like one long word to you and you don't know where to separate it. That's because your ear is not trained to that language. So ear training starts before children are even born. And this is why people recommend that you should narrate everything you do to kids or read to them all the time, even if they don't totally know what you're saying, because you're training their ear. Now, when it comes to when they're actually able to read, 5, 6, 7 is about the range, but even up to 9 can be normal. In order to read, both the hemispheres of your brain have to be able to talk to one another, and they're joined by this thing, I'm going to call it a thing, called the corpus callosum, which is just part of your brain that joins the 2 hemispheres. You can't read unless that's fully formed, but there is a way to test for it, and you have the child lift one of their arms up, it doesn't matter which arm, and they have to be able to reach over the top of their head and touch their ear, because they're crossing the midline of their body. And if they can't do that, like they'll go behind their head, that means it's not formed. It's not formed enough. So this is also why when children are learning how to crawl, or they learn how to skip, or they learn how to run, all of that bilateral movement where they're crossing over the midline of their body is developing their brain and helping them. And it's going to help them learn how to read.
I see. What is the bar? Like, when are you supposed to be able to read according to like the California school system? Do you know? Or at least, like, I'm curious when they think, like, when are you illiterate if you don't know how to read?
When are you illiterate?
Like, is there an age where they consider, like, you are behind, like, you know, you have failed, you haven't learned how to read?
If you can't read by 1st grade, that would be mean.
And how old are kids in 1st grade?
They turn 7. They're 6 and they turn 7.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
What would you say if I told you there's a company that's kind of popular, at least in the bubble that is Twitter, called Mentava? It's an iPad app that teaches kids how to read when they're 3, and they give you your money back if it doesn't work.
I'm sure it works for some kids whose brains are developing really quickly, but I wouldn't say it works for all kids. Actually, sure. I know this is going to make me sound like a boomer, but the most scientifically proven way to learn like factual information, like the letter sounds in a language, is with flashcards.
Interesting. Do you not think you could like simulate something like flashcards on an iPad?
Oh, I'm sure you could. I'm sure you could simulate flashcards on an iPad.
Okay, I'll send it to you. I'm curious what you actually think of it. It is $500 a month.
Please. Just
Wow.
hire me. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Come on, I'll give your kid a little pup cup when they're done.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
How did we go from science-based learning to basically game show-based learning, where we just cover things and have them guess? How did that happen?
Well, okay, so it was popularized by Marie Clay. Marie Clay was this researcher in New Zealand, and she went to classrooms because she wanted to learn how kids learn how to read. This is what I mean by teacher education being bad. Like, how do we not know that? And whatever. The research isn't funded well enough. Nobody cares about education. Yada, yada, yada. I'll get off my soapbox. But she was watching kids read, and she was like, oh, the good readers don't sound out words. That's because they already did that. They already know how to read because they've already gone through that phase. So curriculum developers, like, have you heard of the name Fountas and Pinnell before? My goodness, you guys gotta go to school on this. So Fountas and Pinnell were these curriculum publishers in the United States who used Marie Clay's research to create curriculum, and they developed the 3 cueing system. Where it's like, oh, okay, well, good readers don't stumble over words and try to sound them out. So we're just going to like look at it and guess it till it's right. She was sold on that. And there's another woman who developed curriculum whose name is Lucy Calkins. She did the same exact thing. And from my knowledge, I mean, this was before my time, but to my knowledge, these women were like the Beyonce of education. Like, people just absolutely loved them and felt like they had cracked the secret code. And it was fun. And their idea was that they wanted kids to be reading avidly, and they want kids to be cuddled up like with a book and a blanket and some hot cocoa. That sounds great, but they can't do that till they know how to read. And so people were just kind of like, they loved the idea, and it became popular.
So
it's almost as if
go for it.
It's almost as if they were trying to improve the act of teaching reading and like making it fun for the teacher rather than like focusing on the results of the kids. Totally.
And teaching directly to kids, really, people hate the idea of that for some reason. They think it's really boring, but it's the way that you learn everything. You're not going to learn how to drive a car by singing a song about driving a car. Someone has to tell you, this is how you drive the car. Then we do it together so you don't crash, and then you're going to go out on your own. And that's the way we learn everything. Now, there is something called discovery learning, which was basically tinkering. Think about maker spaces, think about following your interests, and all of that is really great, but you have to have educational tools with you to be able to discover anything. You don't just skip to the discovery part. And I think that's what they were trying to do.
I see. Something interesting. I wonder if I'm trying to figure out how we got here, right? So like, there are all these people that made this, flashy new. I can understand that. Like, here's a flashy new thing. We should all try it. It's great. But then, why do you think we don't like measure the result has been measured? Actually, I was going to say we don't measure it. We do measure it, and then seem to just ignore it. How much of this do you think parents have signed up for? So like, everyone in San Francisco is well aware here. Okay, we tried to get rid of algebra, and then all the Asian Americans in San Francisco said no and recalled half the school board. And it was the first political act they ever took because they're like, no, our kids are going to learn math. Like the stereotype is real. Like, what is wrong with you? We're not going to let you stop teaching our kids math. And they got rid of them. I mean, they were activated, and San Francisco is very Asian, and it worked. But then just recently this year, San Francisco School District was saying, hey, let's make A's like a 81, I think. 81% is an A. And if you fail a test, you can just keep taking it until you get that A, because it's pretty easy to get now. And they paused it. But again, it's paused it, not like, oh, we'll never do that again. But I think the bigger question is, how do you even come up with an idea like that? And how much do you think they are in lockstep with parents, or they're just like a small group of insane people coming up with these ideas, and parents maybe have no idea or don't care?
Yeah, I think parents are largely uninformed. I think this is even at a private school where parent involvement is pretty high, there's not a single parent who I feel knows what goes on during the school day. Even if I tell them explicitly, this is what happens. It's just, you're worried about your own job, and you have a million things on your own to-do list. So I think parents are very, very unaware. And one good thing that came out of COVID is that a lot of people saw their kids online learning, and they were pretty dismayed about what was going on in online learning. And that's not to blame the teachers. A lot of teachers are just beholden to what their administrators tell them, beholden to a school board. They just want kids to learn and they've got to do what they're told. But yeah, I don't think that they know exactly what they're signing up for sometimes. And I think
And
that this is just coming about as like, I'm just going to call it like the cult of feel goodism. Like,
yeah.
you can't, it's not always going to feel good. Your learning doesn't always feel good. Doing your job doesn't always feel good. Showing up however you need to show up as an adult, it doesn't always feel good. And that's just, we have to accept that.
And is this all downstream of just like toxic compassion? Are we trying to make all the students feel good, and in the process we're making them all stupid to make sure no one feels bad? Like, how do you end up with a policy where we get rid of algebra, or we're not allowed to give, or we're giving A's for B minuses? Like, I don't get it.
Sure, it could be a bit of toxic compassion as part of that puzzle that we're putting
Yeah.
together here. You know, there's also people who it's tied into funding. You need students to be graduating in order to get funding for your school. And so there's this money piece to it. There's a piece of parents who won't take no for an answer, and my kid's going to get an A no matter what you say, even if they don't deserve it. And I think that we just need like an education. I don't want to say a total reset, but just an attitude reset. We need an attitude reset as a country where, you know, we don't value this. Like, I tell people I'm a teacher, and they kind of, well, first of all, they either act like I'm in the military and say thank you for your service, or they kind of look at me. Yeah, you're welcome. Or they kind of look at me like, oh, okay, you don't really have a real job. All the rest of us over here, we've got a real job. And so we just have this attitude that education is just child's play. And so we can kind of do whatever we want with it. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. This is the most important piece of who you are.
Yeah.
I understand the former reaction. I'm not saying it's right, but the latter sounds insane. Like, who are these assholes? Who are you talking?
They are among us. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Sometimes I've been called a babysitter before. I'm not babysitting your kid. Absolutely.
Here, let me play devil's advocate. I will steel man
All right, here we go.
the bad people out there. I know I have probably 5 or 6 friends that are teachers. I'll count you in that group. So I think 2 of the 6 teachers I know love the job. They should be teachers. They care about it. I feel like 4 of them tried to be business people, and then they failed and they got a teaching credential. And like, they're very political. Like, I follow them on Instagram. Are they in
private or public school, Jack?
They're public school teachers. And they're like, I'm not going to call them bad people, but they're not people I would want my kids listening to. And I don't think they care. I think teaching to them was like a plan B, just, okay, like I can just become a teacher kind of thing. And like, when I think of teachers, I think of both categories. And depending on like who I'm talking to, my brain sifts, sort of sorts the teacher into one of those buckets. So that's like my perspective on it. And that's also who I think those low quality teachers are, the ones pushing these bad curriculums. Maybe. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, Karen?
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be good teachers and bad teachers. Just having the title of teacher doesn't make you like this saint who can't be criticized. Yeah. There are, I just like to say, there are just idiots everywhere. They're in every profession, and they abound, and I can't control that. I've known some teachers where I thought, what are you doing being a teacher? Yeah. Like, you really don't care about this. But that's also because the entrance to be a teacher is probably too easy. It's probably too easy to become a teacher. But if you're going to make it harder, you have to pay teachers more. You have to support them more. Some people they're very excited to be a teacher at the beginning of their career, and then they become really burnt out. It is a really taxing job. Like, it's hard to, in elementary, it's hard to wrangle a classroom of 8 and 9-year-olds, teach them 6 subjects, and plan, prep, grade for all of those, deal with their parents who can either be, your advocate or your worst enemy. Yeah. And then sometimes in the middle of the day, they'll just come up to your desk and they're poking you, they're saying your name 150 times, or they'll be like, I can't see my dad because he does pills. And you're like, I am so tired.
Oh, no.
I'm so tired. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. And so if you're going to make it harder, make the pay better. And you have to, I think it's wrong for the human nervous system to be in a room with 25 kids. I think we need more than one adult in there.
I agree with that. No, especially seeing the numbers, 17,000 per kid in California, I think it was. 2 teachers does make sense. And when I think about what you do every day, it is nothing short of amazing. Like, I couldn't do that. I literally could not. Maybe I could teach like high school math, but I could not teach. I couldn't even teach middle school. Like, I was a middle schooler. That's the worst time. We teach all the kids sex ed in 5th grade, and then we just unleash them on 6th grade. Like, if you're a 6th grade teacher, that is a raw deal.
Yeah. No, I don't think I'd touch middle school either, to be fair.
So as we talk about like the student to teacher ratio problem and scaling, like how do you scale up good education? Of course, I brought up micro schools earlier, this idea that like, if you're going to homeschool your kid, there might be some problems with it, and you're just going to be home anyways. Why don't you homeschool 7 kids? And now you have a school. Of course, you need to question like some kind of track record. Like, are you using phonics? Are you actually teaching math? But I think those are things you could easily measure, especially for younger kids. And so that's one interesting model. You could make enough money doing it, and you'd have a really good ratio of 1 to 7 for every class. Totally. Other things and founders that I meet are they're using AI and they're building software-based tutors to like kind of scale up education. I think there are obviously pros and cons with that. I think before I color the conversation, what are your opinions or what is your experience with like software-assisted education or tutoring?
Yeah, a couple things. I'm not anti-tech in classrooms. I use it extremely sparingly, though.
Yeah.
I notice, I have like a TV in my classroom that I can mirror things to, almost like how people used to use a projector.
Sure.
But I've noticed that days where I use that, their behavior is worse. And I'm like, what's this screen doing to you? Why are you crazy? And so I've just gone back totally to a whiteboard, and I like it so much more. And kids really quickly also learn how to abuse technology. And so I used to, at the end of 3rd grade, they're ready to kind of start doing novel studies. And we would read, and I had these Kindles in my classroom for research and an online library, like access to an online library. And they were looking up like the plot and the vocab words on the Kindles. I had to put them in tech jail. I was like, I see you doing that. Like, I can see you right now. So that's hard.
Is it just one kid who figured that out and then he just poisons the class? Like, how did...
Totally. Yeah.
That's funny.
Always one. It's always fun.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm not on AI. I'm not anti-AI. So sometimes I want my students to do a really specific assignment that's not in my curriculum. And so I got to generate that myself. And so there's not a lot of time in the school day. I have I'm lucky, by the way, with how much prep time I have. I'm fortunate that I get 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon to do all my planning, prepping, and grading. That is an extremely fortunate teacher situation. Most people are getting none of that.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so I will just use ChatGPT to write something for me, and then I'll proofread it, because I'm like, I can't write a children's story right now. Like, I don't have the juices. But what I am scared about with AI is when we have this idea that AI is going to save the world and it can replace teachers, I fear 2 things. We, number one, are underestimating the impact of learning from other humans, because all day my students are looking at me to see how I would react to a situation. If their friend does something mean to them while they're playing, they're looking at me immediately like, did you see that? And do you see that I was kind of the victim of like, this person colored on my paper and I didn't want them to, or whatever? Are you seeing it? Are you going to react? And are you going to stop it? They're looking for my human reaction. They're looking for my reaction, my facial expressions when I read. That's part of reading. Like, you can't just say, Jimmy felt sad. It's, Jimmy felt sad, and they're learning how to be in tune with their own emotions and other people's emotions, and it's also one of the purposes of schools that it's a safe place, and the adults in that school are safe for children. And so when they do come up to you and say something like, I don't want to see my dad because he does pills, like, that's something that a mandated reporter has to handle, and it's something that they're looking for human compassion on. Number 2 is that I fear that we do recognize the power of a human being in a classroom, but that we're going to give the crappy schools that no one wants to work in the AI teacher, and then the wealthy kids are going to have the human teacher.
Yep. It's interesting you say that. I feel like that might just be what happens. Only if you can't. I mean, look, if you can't, one thing you can't scale is like human beings, right? If there's only so many good teachers, of course, there's a teacher education piece. Maybe we'll have a revolution in teacher education that makes every teacher a good teacher. And then, everything I'm about to say will be false. And that'd be great. That'd be a great outcome if that's possible. But if you think about it, if you're trying to lower the ratio as much as possible, let's say you wanted just a personal tutor for every kid. I mean, that's just physically impossible. You need as many tutors as there are kids then. So you can't do that. And then obviously you can keep making that ratio bigger and bigger, but you could see the problem at getting excellent teachers with small class sizes everywhere, at least in the United States, forget about the world. And so I've seen a couple different models. I'm curious. What?
Forget about them, forget about the world.
Yeah, one country at a time. Let me bring up a couple different models where AI education comes in. I'm curious what you think. So we'll start with like the most out there to things that are happening today. So I got pitched today on something that doesn't exist, but basically the founder is telling me, okay, look, I think that school is a lot of things. Like it's daycare, it's education, it's credentialing. There's so many different pieces that are all wrapped into one. He said it is a bad thing. I don't think that's crazy. I have a nanny. She takes care of my son as the main thing, but she also does the dishes. I think it's great that she does the dishes. So I don't think it's a problem that a product does multiple, like a person or a product or whatever does multiple things. And so I would say that's an advantage of school, not a disadvantage of one. But his whole idea was, okay, what if you made a great AI tutor that met every student where they were, and they were patient, and they had a great voice. Maybe they used Jack's company to generate the voice, so it's lifelike. And, it's just an amazing tutor at reading and math or whatever the subject is. And the kid can do it for a couple hours, and then they walk outside, and they're like around people, like the greatest camp counselors of all time. And so it's a different kind of person and a different kind of setup, but completely separate this idea of like adult people who are useful and kind and caring and education. And the idea behind it was this is going to be like dirt cheap compared to any other setup and might be interesting. And he's going to go try it. I don't really have strong opinions about it, but just hearing that, I'm curious what you think about that scenario, if it happens somewhere.
Have you guys seen ChatGPT hallucinate though? Like even if, as we are right now, I don't think AI is good enough to do that.
For sure.
Because for multiple reasons. It hallucinates. It is not a real person. You learn so much more face to face. Like we tried online learning during COVID and students did terribly. They can't focus on their own or, whatever it is. I think that we just need human connection too, though. Human connection is as vital to kids as breathing or sleeping or playing. And I know that they'll have quote unquote human connection with the greatest camp counselors ever when they go outside. But why? But why not just make the human better?
Sure.
I just anything that wants to replace teachers, like I just don't know if you can. My question to those people would be, how much time have you spent in a classroom yourself? And how well do you know kids? Because we think we know kids in our head, and then you meet them and they say ridiculous things to you, and they're smart and they're learning, but they're really not smart at all and don't know anything. I just think that person probably, I don't know them and I don't know their credentialing, but probably lacks an understanding of child development and the role of charismatic people. Just one piece of information that I'll say to that is that one of the most influential, not the number one. The number one is your socioeconomic status, but one of the most influential pieces in a child's life is the influence of one charismatic adult. And oftentimes that's a teacher. And if you have one of those, your chances of being more successful just skyrocket.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was pretty skeptical too. I mean, let's see what happens. I mean, experiments are interesting. Who knows if it'll even happen. But to bring this to a more real world example of something that exists now and exists for years, have you heard of Alpha School?
Against my will, yeah.
Against your will? Interesting. Okay, why do you say that?
Because my boyfriend was talking to me about it and he was like, don't you just want our kids to go there? And I looked at him like, are you kidding? No, are you kidding?
Okay, let me tee it up. Let me tee it up for people who maybe don't know what Alpha School is. I mean, here's the thing, like it's hard to judge like I'll just give you a brief overview without going there and meeting the kids and the teachers. Like, it's impossible to like pass any real judgment. So I'll just throw that as a disclaimer, because we don't know. You could go there and everyone's happy and everyone's learning and it's amazing. I personally think it's interesting. So I'll throw my prior out there. So the whole idea is, Jack, have you heard of Alpha School or no?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So basically their whole idea is, look, there's 2 hours of AI-assisted personalized education, but there's not really classes, so they're mixed age groups based on their academic level as determined by them, Alpha School. And so it's like, okay, if you're all at this point in math, then you guys are grouped into a pod, and you have 2 hours like in front of an iPad with headphones, and it's totally personalized to you and exactly where you are with your education. And that's 2 hours of the day, and the rest is more like building agency, project-based stuff, like kind of freewheeling alternative education, and that's all like in real life and not on the screen. And that's like the other 6 hours of the school day. And you are in a building, like this isn't something like totally crazy. I mean, it is just a kind of private school. I mean, that's the idea at a high level. They like to say that your kid will be a 98th percentile on your money back, and they haven't had to refund anyone apparently. And it is expensive, but expensive as any other. Well, this is in Texas right now, and they're expanding. And I think it's like 40 or 50K, but like a year. But that's how much like a private school in San Francisco costs too. So that part isn't crazy, but it is a lot of money.
Yeah.
So what brings your immediate reaction to that? Because there are teachers. This is not like the crazy first idea I told you. It's far off from that.
Yeah. A couple things. So number one, when we're talking about a school that's extremely expensive like that, 40, 50,000 a year, we have to look at it with the overview, knowing that the research supports that the number one determinant of how well your student does academically is the socioeconomic status of their parents. And so if you can afford a school that's $40,000 or $50,000, there's just no shot that your family is resource poor. You know, you're eating good meals at home, you have a safe, clean environment, you have everything that you need, you could have a tutor outside of school, you have ample toys to play with, whatever it is. And so all of those things are coming together to make those kids really successful. It's also like, you know, what's the correlation between IQ and how much money you make in your life? And so is it just that your parents make a lot of money because their IQ is really high, and so genetically your IQ is going to be really high, and you would have been in the 98th percentile no matter where you were, if you were in the crappy public school or if you're in Alpha School? So there's some questions there, like what came first, chicken or the egg? Number two is that I'm not anti-AI. I do think that it's important for older kids to know how to interact with it because it is here to stay. And I think that that's obvious, but it's also an extremely, extremely powerful tool. This is like, we don't want to jump the gun on this, kind of like the people who are putting iPads in front of their kids before we knew anything about iPads in front of kids. Let's walk it back a few steps. Think about other important and powerful tools that people use. Scalpels, chainsaws. We don't let kids play with those. And so it's not like that you can't learn how to use it when you're older. I just think that that's something for older kids who have the maturity to be able to use it. Just with less powerful technology, like iPads. One of the schools that I worked at has used iPads for middle school. Within the first week of having an iPad, the kids are sending death threats to each other, porn, and the suicide hotline number. And so that's how kids use tech. They don't know.
Do you think that's a question of
it.
open access, though? So, for example, for these 2 hours, I mean, I imagine I've been told, I mean, they have a very like locked in experience. Like, this is a teacher, like you are learning a lesson. Like, you can't just like exit out and like go use the iPad. And it's not like open where you're just chatting with ChatGPT. Like, obviously they have created like a teacher that is teaching them something. It's not like they have open access to the internet and like ChatGPT.
Yeah, that is much better.
Yeah.
Like, rein it in and put some constraints on it so that it's not just whatever the kids want it to be. But yeah, I would say socioeconomic status is important, and AI is a very powerful tool, and we just want to make sure that we're wielding it correctly, especially when it comes to kids, because kids are a protected population, and it's our duty as adults to make sure that they are protected.
So what do you think other answers are? So we know where you're not going to send your kids. So
No, I don't know. So no, go ahead. I know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
No, say, go ahead.
You think I'm not going to send them to a public school?
I'm actually like, I really want to go. I just need to make a trip to Texas. I'm so curious how the kids feel about it. Because I've been reading more instead of like this top line stuff about, 2 hours and your kids are the smartest and the PR stuff. I've read parent reviews. It might just be going off Jack's terrible public school experience all the way to Alpha school and nothing in between. And so it's obviously better because my kids are really happy and they're coming back from school and don't want to go on breaks because they're going to miss out in school and they're having so much fun. So obviously if you hear that as a parent, if those are your two samples, either Alpha school or public school, and a shitty public school, I'm sure they're good ones, then obviously you're going to be excited about it. Okay, so maybe you're not going to send your kids there. There's at least this knee-jerk reaction that it's no good. Where would you send them? Like, what are the things that you would explore? Because when I shared the state versus state data with parents, people were shocked. But the next question is, what the hell do we do? This isn't going to work, so what do we do? And I was like, I don't have the answer, but I'm starting to look into it now. Is it just go to some good private school that you've heard of? Is it go to a micro school? Is it homeschool your kids? Obviously, every kid is different. Every family is different. But I'm curious, maybe personally for you, what is the answer then if public schools aren't working? Where we are here in California.
Yeah. Well, just real quick, I do think that the science of reading is gaining traction. And so I think that the public schools are going to be using it more and more. I hope that we use the research well and that we implement the science of reading well and we don't implement it in this really kind of like a thoughtless way and then go, see, that didn't work either. And so I do think that the public schools are going to be improving in their reading in the coming decade or so. So I think that it depends on where you live. Like we're in the Bay Area, right? So the cities are really diverse. They can be really diverse socioeconomically. I think it totally just depends on where you live. Like right now I'm in the East Bay, there's a number of public schools that I would feel comfortable sending my kids to. Okay. But I would also like private school. But I've also seen private schools that are really resource poor because they're just made for general education kids. So if you have a kid with special needs, you're going to need something else. What I'm saying is I think I'm open, and I think that parents need to be informed and they need to go and find out what's happening in schools that they're looking in. They need to find out about how they teach reading and math. They need to find out about how they handle discipline and how they handle community at their school. Be an informed consumer of the education of your student and then make the decision that's best for your family. And that's what I plan on doing.
Interesting. Yeah.
I'm curious. So maybe two things. I heard this quote, I think it's Scott Galloway said this. He said, I might be misquoting him entirely, maybe he said the opposite of this, but instead of sending your kid to private school, just send him to public school and put away the $1 million that you would have spent and just give it to them when they turn 28 or whatever. What do you think about that? And also, maybe as a part two to that, if you had to do that and you knew there were blind spots, what are the main things a kid needs to walk away from school with? Because I feel like I didn't walk away with anything but bad, just bad memories. And then I sort of figured things out in college and I got good enough grades where I was able to go to a good school and whatever. But I'm curious, what's the point of school? And could you just get away with sending them to a crappy school and then just giving them $1 million when they're in their late 20s?
Okay, so I have a boomer that lives inside of me. I don't know. But I would say no. I would rather them have a better foundational education experience and then have to go just earn their money on their own rather than just giving them the money that I would have spent on their education. And I think that the research shows and my experience proves that the younger you are, the more important your education is. And so let's say money is tight for you. If you can really, really only afford a little bit of private school, I would just do it through elementary and then stop. Even better if you could do it through middle school when bullying is super rampant, because private schools have a little more, they can act on that a little bit better. The public schools, their hands are tied because they have to have those kids there. So the foundation is really important because it's very hard, maybe impossible, to undo all of that early learning. And so giving them the best that they can get at that time is going to help them become something like a lifelong learner who can go and do whatever they want with their life. It's like being a Swiss Army knife of a person. And then you can go in any way. And then what was your second question again?
I guess what is the point of school? What am I supposed to walk away with at 18 years old? Yeah,
I would say the point of school is a general liberal arts education. So literacy, basic numeracy, a very basic understanding of science, but you're not a scientist, a very basic understanding of history, but you're not a historian. Maybe you've taken an econ class that had 2 weeks of personal finance. Again, it's kind of back to that Swiss Army knife idea of you've been exposed to a lot of this, you're really good at reading and really good at comprehending and responding either in written or spoken language, and you're really good at basic numeracy skills, so you can kind of go anywhere.
I see. Okay. That makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I mean, I was going to say like another ice cold take from Scott Galloway. I mean, that idiot thought Macy's going to be worth more than Amazon. I mean, if you're going to like, school is most of your life. It's just like a job. You know, people's like, hey, like you better pick your job wisely because it's most of your life, like your living hours. So school is the same way. So if you think the school you're going to is terrible, like saving the money is like the education's gonna be worth more than $1 million, firstly. And secondly, I met a student recently who she really loved her schooling. Like she's in college now. And she's like, yeah, I went to public school and it was great and everything was fine. But really what made me like someone who could start a company like at such a young age was my parents did all this stuff outside of school. And I hear that story a lot. And what I've realized is like, don't we realize the problem? Like what a fucking waste of those hours during the day then. Yeah. Like if all of it was useless and then your parents did like 2 things outside of it, 2 hours of stuff outside of it, then like all you needed was those 2 hours, or maybe you needed 3 hours. But I don't know, it's something I question a lot because I think with my kids, if I need to go just find a great private school, like somewhere where Karen's teaching, and if it's in San Francisco and it's $40,000, $50,000 a year times 2, then it's going to be $100,000. I kind of want to start working backwards. It's like, okay, if the bar is $100,000, like that's a lot of money. Like I just hire like the greatest tutor or tutors on earth and just like invent some new school on my own. I mean, if you're going to spend that much money, it feels like it's possible. I don't know, Karen, what do you think about that? Like you have $100,000 to spend on your kids every year. You can't spend it on anything else. Like what would you do with that money?
Yeah, I would spend it on their education, whether that means, and that can look a couple of different ways. It could mean you send them to the really bougie private school in San Francisco, or it could mean that you have the best tutors and you're traveling the world and learning at the same time. Like I have a cousin who did that. She took her kids out of school because her husband is from Europe. And so she was like, I'm just going to be homeschooling because half the year we want to live in Europe. That's its own type of education too. And so, yeah, whatever works for your family, just the kids are getting educated. They're learning through multiple different avenues, whether you want to do that at the private school or you want to do that at your kitchen table with someone who's the best tutor around. That's your prerogative. And I think either of those is good.
Okay. And, you know, we at least I see a lot of alternative education, like more on this homeschooling side and microschooling side. And we talked about some of the negatives of normal school. What are the brightest spots? What are the best parts of like normal schoolhouse, classroom, teachers? Like what are the best parts of that experience that you think we lose if we take it all away?
If we take it all away?
Yeah, like either you're traveling, like you said, like these parents. Obviously, it's a compromise, so that was probably great for them, but may not be great for someone else. But I'm thinking of like, what are the negatives? Like, what are they losing from not being in this kind of more traditional experience?
I think the biggest thing is a sense of community. Like that makes me think of my own childhood and how I'm friends with all of these people from my schooling, and I'm even friends with their parents, and their parents give me life advice and career advice, and so there's cross-familial learning there, but also just a community of students. It makes me think of my own kids, not my biological kids, my classroom kids, and how we're like a little family together. And I think back to our last day of school where we shared our favorite memories. And one of them said, I just really feel safe here and like this is my family. And that is so vital for their development, to feel like they are part of something that's bigger than just them, that they're part of a community and that the people in this room care about them and that they're safe here. And so if that's not happening for your student at the school where they are, if they don't feel safe and they don't have friends, take them out, because they need to feel that way for their development. And that's where all the magic happens. That's where when you're learning a math lesson and someone makes a joke and the whole class erupts into laughter, like that's where learning and community come together to just make like magic in a room with a bunch of kids.
Yeah. Okay. So I kind of want to leave it there, but I have 2 requests. So when it's a founder, we usually ask them kind of, you know, what could help their company or who they're looking for. I want to ask you, if someone has thought about being a teacher or wants to be a teacher, where should they look, or how could you convince them to go do that?
Go to the classroom of a teacher who loves teaching. Because when I was in college, you have to work in a bunch of people's classrooms. And there was only one teacher that I worked with who ended up becoming my principal, who liked the kids. and the rest of them hated it. They told me, don't do this to yourself. It's the worst choice I've ever made. The kids are idiots, blah, blah. And it was depressing. And then I got to this classroom where this teacher just loved what she did, loved the kids, made it magical, made it hands-on. It was like Disneyland in a classroom, and she knew everything about everything. And it just brought color into my whole career. And I just thought, this is what I've been looking for, and I know that this is right for me if I can make it like this. So go find someone who loves it.
Okay, and then the final question is, if a public school teacher has made it this far in the episode without closing it or like writing down, finding our home addresses, what is something they can do? Like, what is maybe one resource that is like not expensive that they can go to, you know, just bring something into their classroom, make them a better teacher, make their kids happier? What is something they could go do? They're like, I just want to be better at this, and I actually care about what I'm doing, but I'm struggling.
Okay, I would say go get trained in the science of reading. There's many ways you can do that your school will pay for it for you. And sometimes districts, if you can convince your administrator to get whole district training in the science of reading, and you can actually see your students making gains in that area. And I've used it. I used this in my classroom this year, and my kids' first reaction was, that was so fun, and I get it way better now. And that is exactly what a teacher wants to hear. So go get yourself trained in that. I like the Institute of Multisensory Education. They're not the only people, but they are the ones that I'm familiar with. And so do that. It will invigorate you, and you'll see the results.
Okay, amazing. And if you can't afford anything, I'm sure if you search the science of reading on YouTube, you're going to find something decent.
Totally.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you can learn anything on YouTube. But okay, Karen, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for taking the time and chatting with us.
Thank you. I've loved it.